Hello and welcome to Brokenomics. Now, in this episode, we are definitely going to have to get into digital IDs because Tony Blair has risen from the crypt and issued commandments to his minions, including Keir Starmer, that he must obey with the introduction of these horrific ideas. Now, this is very much something I started with when as you know, my backstory, I was just sort of minding my own business at home, and then COVID came along and it particularly upset me. And also at the time, I was reading about the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or Agenda 2030, and also linking it to what was coming out of the Bank of International Settlements about how they wanted they wanted central bank digital currencies, which is very much a part of this story. And they needed digital IDs in order to tie the things together to give them a complete web of control. So when they started doing all this COVID pass nonsense and restricting liberties and all the rest of it, I was really banging the drum as much as I could. And I think the first sort of public thing I did was I went on James Dellingpole's show. And it fitted perfectly with his kind of vibe because, you know, he's into the conspiracy stuff. And so there I was laying out all of this conspiracy stuff. Only it's all come true. So, yes. So, everything that I outlined there has come to pass in various places. So, it's a subject that I've been very much alive to for some time. And I've done a couple of bits on this. I've done a very short 6-minute Twitter post where I did a quick video where I banged through 20 reasons why digital IDs were a very bad idea, wouldn't work, etc. And I did a segment with, Josh and Bo. Josh and Bo. I did a segment with them on there, so I'm trying to get the message out. But those formats don't really let me go into any detail on any of this stuff, and I kind of need to. So for those of you who would like to be equipped with a strong understanding of what's going on here and why it's bad, well, I've got Brokenomics to do that, so that's what I'm going to do. Maybe I should let this one out as a, a freemium, so that as many people as possible can see it and we can push back against this dreadful idea. Okay, I talked about my sort of intro here that I got into all of this talking stuff because of COVID. And I mean, let's just remind ourselves how bloody horrific COVID was. They issued these stay-at-home orders, and you know, it went on for months at ends, and hospitals and gyms and churches and small businesses were forced to shut. And you got £10,000 fines for illegal gatherings. I get it. It was illegal to freely associate. And you got a £10,000 fine if you did. We had bizarre things. We had Manchester police literally battering down the door of some family because they were having a birthday party for their 10-year-old girl, and some other 10-year-old girls were there. And so they broke down the door and stormed it. You had a whole bunch of businesses who were just like, no, I can't do this. I'm not doing this. This is ridiculous. And you just stayed open. They got £10,000 fines. Gyms got £10,000 fine. I mean, at least we didn't go quite as berserk as Canada. They were sort of manhandling priests to the ground and slapping them in shackles and taking them off to jail. I think there's still a Canadian priest who is in jail because he had the temerity to, keep his church open during a tyranny. So, and nightclubs. They closed nightclubs, and then they brought in an NHS app, a COVID pass, said you're only allowed to go to them if you have this COVID pass. I mean, this is a clear forerunner for this digital ID nonsense. Police in Derbyshire, they used drones to track people who went for a walk in the open air. The insanity of that. No, there's a pandemic going on, so you've got to be inside with your windows shut, recirculating the virus. No, you can't just go for a walk in the open air. We're going to use drones to track you. Police didn't have a bloody clue what the actual law was, so they were just going around handing out fines and arresting people left, right and centre because they just heard the rhetoric, and they didn't quite realise that the rhetoric was more extreme than the actual powers the government had. And so, yeah, they were just going around slapping arrests and fines on people left, right and centre. I think in the end it was something like 118,000 COVID fines were issued in just England and Wales. And the narrative drift, I mean, it went from 3 weeks to flatten the curve, if you remember that. 3 weeks, we're just going to have a shutdown for 3 weeks. And in the first 3 weeks, almost everybody was on board. I mean, I was immediately suspicious, and that's when I sort of, dug out the old Twitter account and started posting against it, because I thought, yeah, it's not going to be 3 weeks, is it? And it wasn't 3 weeks, it was 2 bloody years. That's what it turned into. And all of this has set a legal precedent that, the Coronavirus Act basically gave government tyrannical powers. And it was renewed multiple times. Lots of it was clearly illegal, but the courts just sided with them anyway. People who brought challenges against this were just slapped down on no legal basis. So that's the thing you have to remember with all of this stuff I'm going to talk about with digital IDs. It would be one thing if our government had a robust history of defending civil liberties at every point. But actually what they've done is, the moment you give them the slightest inkling that they can grab absolute tyrannical powers, they always do it immediately. I mean, it's not just that. I mean, there's other examples. They brought in anti-terror legislation. And David Davis, he's got a good one. He resigned in protest to a lot of this stuff. And a lot of people were saying, well, why are you resigning against anti-terror powers? I mean, that's ridiculous. And he was like, no, this will be misused immediately. And what happened? Councils started using anti-terror legislation to fine people who put their bins out on the wrong day. So you cannot give government power on the basis that it will stop terrorism or stop a virus, or the current excuse, which is palpable, that it's going to be used to stop the illegal boat crossings or stop them working in Deliveroo once they get here. Because these powers will be immediately used to the maximum possible tyrannical extent the moment that they can be. And my source for this is basically all of history, including recent British history, and basically every other country where they did this nonsense as well. It is going to be wrapped up in CBDCs. The Bank of International Settlements, I'll come to that, is it's just openly saying, this is a full control mechanism. It's what digital IDs are for. It's so that we can have control. Can you imagine if they had the combination of this stuff, digital IDs and CBDCs, during COVID? So, I mean, it wouldn't have been that you needed a Vaxport passport to go somewhere. You would have just been turned off from the ability to travel more than 15 minutes from your home. You wouldn't be able to make purchases. Small businesses that tried to stay open would just be told, no, your account is switched off. You wouldn't be able to travel. You wouldn't be able to protest. Your card, your payments wouldn't work. You wouldn't have been able to buy a holiday, go away, see a family member. I suppose the one thing that would be useful from their point of view is they could do more directed COVID payments as sort of furlough payments for shutdown. So you might think it would do some of the fraud, but of course, once they've got this ability, I mean, they're just going to spunk so much money on it, it's going to be ridiculous. Oh, the other thing, you have to remember with COVID as well, is they went to war on COVID misinformation. And that was basically anybody who actually knew anything got silenced. You had people who had won Nobel Prizes for virus and immunology type stuff who were getting censored off YouTube. You had people who were lifelong cardiologists and immunologists who were saying, hang on, this is nonsense. This doesn't make any sense. Jay Bhattacharya something. There was another American guy whose name escapes me. There was that German Thai dude. I can't remember the names now, but you had all these people who were eminently qualified in this. I'm just forgetting names again. But there was another guy who was the senior immunologist at Pfizer, who had subsequently retired, who was coming out and saying, no, this is insanity. What they're telling you cannot possibly make sense for these following reasons. All of them banned, deplatformed, taken away. If you had digital IDs in there and your ability to link to the internet was tied to your digital ID, which this will be, it wouldn't have been a question of banning these videos once they come out. It would be a question of banning you from even accessing the internet in order to give the interview in the first place. People who protested, I went on a whole bunch of the COVID protests. You'd just be locked out. it'd be like, you're from Winchester and you're going to a protest in London, and you're trying to buy a train ticket or something, or you're trying to buy petrol too far from your home. No, your car's just turned off. Can't do it. You're not going to get it. Also, if you ever go to a protest, I don't know what it's like in other countries, but in Britain, the police spend 90% of their time filming everybody. They go around with these cameras on these poles, trying to make sure they clock everybody's face so they can stick it in a biometric database. Again, linked to a digital ID, immediately identify everybody there, and then these people get extra scrutiny. They get their bank accounts frozen, whatever else. So what did I say? 118,000 fines were issued. £10,000 fines were handed out liberally. COVID passes tied to the NHS app were, handed out. They were basically mandated across a whole bunch of, everything. I remember I was a school governor at the time, and whatever, there was this thing at the school that couldn't be put off. It was a necessary thing to happen, and the headmistress took it upon herself to say, "Oh, well, we're only going to let in vaccinated people." And I, of course, kicked off at that. It's like, no, we're not bloody doing that. Don't be so sodding silly. Furlough scheme, 70 billion was spent on that. If you had the combination of digital IDs and central bank digital currencies, because the whole goal was to stimulate the economy, because they spent a lot of money shutting the economy down, and then every so often it occurred to them that what they were doing was utterly ruinous, and they wanted to suddenly inject a bit more money into the thing. And especially with the US COVID, there was a Bitcoin spike because everybody got these furlough payments or whatever they called them there. These payments for sorry, we fucked you over so badly over COVID, and loads of people just went out and bought Bitcoin with it. So there's a massive spike in it, which is not really what they were intending it to be used for. With a digital ID and central bank digital currency, you could be issued a payment, but it's programmable money, meaning that you can only use it on the things that they want you to use it on. So consumption, a restaurant or buying something from Walmart, and if you've not used it within 30 days, this money has an expiry date. In time, and I come to this, they're going to do that with everything. Wages. Why are you hoarding money? Why aren't you spending? Why aren't you consuming? Your wages are. We can't have you saving, because if any of you save, you might get notions that you can leave your social rung. You might get the idea that one day you could start to even gradually approach the global elites. And we're not having that. So therefore, your wages, you can't buy any assets. You can't do anything like that. You get your wages, and you have to spend it on consumption. And if you've not spent it within 2 months, it expires. Your money's gone. So, given that we've already had that recent history, anybody who can remember that, which is hopefully most of you, apart from the NPCs who has seemed to have forgotten COVID already, this absolutely must be stopped. Now, of course, the Trojan horse that they're pitching this stuff on is digital ID will stop illegal immigration and illegal working. Bollocks, will it? Absolutely not. So it's presented as a security measure framed around border control, because that's the thing that people are most concerned about. And the Blairite logic is something like, if every citizen must verify themselves at every turn, illegals will stand out. Well, nonsense. First of all, the digital ID is not going to stop a boat landing in Kent. And all these people are already working in the illegal sector. They're doing takeaway delivery jobs. I think it's something like 40% of all takeaway delivery drivers are illegal immigrants. Deliveroo, for example, they recently put out a statement saying, well, look, if you insist on stopping illegal immigration, our costs are going to have to go up. So don't do that, because then you have to pay more because you can't be bothered to go and pick up your Chinese or your pizza or something. And there's already right to work checks. You can ask for passports and national insurance numbers and driving license and all the rest of it. So the immigration problem is not a lack of ID, it's a lack of enforcement over the powers that are already there, because obviously they don't actually have a problem with illegal immigration. It's quite useful. They have a problem with not having enough control over those of us who are here legally. And all of those people coming over illegally, they will eventually be made legal citizens. It will. So, you've got to understand the scale of failure that the government has on this. So 2023, which is, it's probably not the last year reliable figures, but it's the last one reliable figures that I looked up. 3,612 enforced returns. So less than 4,000. What was it 10 years earlier than that? 13,000. Right. So even with all of this focus on illegal immigration, they managed to more than quarter, the amount of returns going back. Clearly, the government has no will to enforce this, and that is the problem. And tens of thousands of asylum seekers are well, not even asylum, illegal immigrants. They're just people who come over on regular hundreds of thousands just come over on regular visas and then just outstay it. So we've now got into the situation where we've got these over 100,000 illegal immigrants now in hotels, and that's costing us £8 million a day. Digital ID does not fix that. Policy does. The willingness to enforce existing policy and to leave the ECHR, the European Court of Human Rights, to get out of that and just have the will to do it. And you've got all of the tools you already need. Now, this has got Tony Blair's fingerprints all over it, this scheme. He tried to bring in ID, not digital ID, but regular ID cards in 2000. And at this time, because the big issue was counter-terrorism, he sold it as a counter-terrorism mechanism. Why was it being sold as counter-terrorism back then, and it's to stop illegal migration now? It's just because whatever happens to be at the top of the news cycle, that is a justification that you're given. Now, he spent £6 billion on it, and it was scrapped in 2010 because there was a massive public backlash. People started to understand that this was a nonsense. Are you really going to be willing to arrest little old ladies who've gone to the shops, who don't have who left their ID card at home, or maybe they don't want one? Are you willing to do that? Well, if you're not, then the thing's pointless. And I mean, that's how we got rid of ID cards in this country before post Second World War. I'll come on to that. So, it was abandoned after spending £6 billion on it. And Tony Blair is not the sort of crypt creature that suffers failure. And he has been brewing on this for the last 15 years. He has not let this go. So he went off and he created the Tony Blair Institute, which is basically a way where he gets to be in charge of just about every government everywhere. I mean, literally, he sat on the stage at Davos and referred to his presidents, the presidents that work for him, and he's got a lot of African ones, but he expands as broadly as he's got a bunch of Middle East ones. I mean, he basically, if you're president or prime minister or somewhere, I mean, he'll put you in his pocket quite happily, and then you can take his orders. And it's extraordinary how he's been able to do this, but he is quite good at this whole politics stuff. He created the Tony Blair Institute, which is funded by big tech, and basically the goal of it is to take over a country or to put a president in your pocket, and then you go in there and you start selling digital infrastructure. So you take out a massive loan. You won't actually see that money. It will go straight to my big tech friends, and then you'll get an app, or you'll get a bit of database something. I mean, you won't get it. I mean, it will all be hosted outside of your country, but you'll get all this digital stuff, and it will allow you to be a proper government, and then you can attend events, and then you can say all the right things about how we're combating people being straight, or eating steaks, or using too much carbon, or whatever the great evil at the time is. We're combating it, and we've got this app thing that we bought from the Tony Blair Institute. That's how it works. And you have to appreciate that the functionality creep that will occur if he gets his way and he gets these digital IDs. So straight away, these digital ID cards that apparently it's just a check when you sign up to work. That's what he's saying. When you take out a new job, you'll just need to check the ID. That's the only thing it's for. It will immediately go into banking. It will. And why do I say that? Because Sweden, Denmark, and Singapore, they already had that. They had a very limited digital ID brought in immediately. No, now it's tied to banking. It will be tied to healthcare access, as in the Andhar digital ID system in India, or indeed as our own NHS COVID pass. It'll be used for rations when it gets that bad, pensions, hospital entry, all of those things. Voting participation, again, I can give you the example of Ukraine's DIA system, DIIA, however the hell you pronounce that bloody thing. So in Ukraine, they brought in digital ID, immediately used for voting. I mean, if it was only that, I mean, I could possibly get on board with it, but no, it's not. Transport. China brought in digital IDs, immediately linked it to transport. So if you are a political dissident, you can't buy a plane ticket or a train ticket or a hotel. You're basically locked down into your local area. Internet access. That is something that the EU is proposing for their digital ID system, and China, of course, are already doing that. So with all of these things, the functionality creep happens very quickly after you get into all this stuff. Not the government will be doing any of this stuff, of course, because it's incompetent and it can't. But that's where the Tony Blair Institute comes in that he's got all these big tech backers who he will pass the contract to. Interestingly, it turns out his own son decided to go into tech, to become, a tech mogul. And he stands to benefit from billions from this as well. I mean, what a bloody remarkable coincidence that is. So, what about the Tony Blair speech to the World Economic Forum, Davos, in 2021? He said, digital IDs will become the new normal, a natural progression from the COVID pass. So that's his attitude. This is normal. It's happening. Deal with it. There was a Home Office report in 2019 off the back of an earlier piece of work that the World Economic Forum had done. And they said the scale of illegal working is unknown but significant. Employers often evade checks. Well, they can avoid these checks as well. The takeaway deliveries, they're going to continue to pay cash. This isn't going to work. Even back in 2006, civil liberty campaigners were against this stuff, warning that it wasn't going to prevent terrorism, correct, but it will erode the privacy of the law-abiding majority. They were absolutely right about all of that stuff. Right. If it really wants to care about illegals, and I've covered this previously, but I'll quickly recap it here, leave the ECHR so you can actually deport people. You need a offshore processing for migrants. Australia do this with a little island called Nauru or something like that. And, we got St. Helena's, we got the Falklands. There's a whole bunch of places where we could put up some barbed wire, a few tents, stick people there. Suddenly they will discover that it's not so interesting getting into the country. And then just use the huge array of existing powers. That's how you stop illegal immigration. Nothing to do with bloody digital IDs. It's just a Trojan horse. Right. Bigger agenda. Look at the UN Sustainable Development Goals, what they used to call 2030, but then everybody started saying, oh, it's part of a 2030 plan, so they scrapped it and decided to bring in something which didn't trip off the tongue as well. So instead of saying 2030, we now have to say Sustainable Development Goals. Look in particular at section 16.9. By 2030, providing legal identity for all, including births and registrations. So the moment you're born, you get linked to a digital ID, and then everything you do from that point on is tracked and linked and fed back to the government. And they also say in that report that digital ID will be a prerequisite for accessing services, finance, and mobility. So they're just outright saying it. You won't be able to access services. You won't be able to travel. You won't be able to buy anything unless it's linked to your digital ID. It is total control. And they frame this as inclusive society and sustainable development. It's I mean, they pad it. I mean, they put out a chapter heading about sustainable development or, inclusive society. And then every point under it is just about, total control. And it's also open and it's so obvious. They're not even hiding this stuff. It's just they know that nobody's going to look. So in reality, this is going to become a gateway for banking, healthcare, education, travel, leisure. Everything really. The same UN report talks about digital ecosystems as part of the public good. What do they mean by public good? What's good for the elites? Right. Let's go on to the World Bank and the IMF. So there was a society called ID4D, which was funded by the Bill Gates Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, and a whole bunch of other sort of globalist organizations. And their explicit goal, and again, you can just go and read this stuff on the website, they're not hiding it, they're perfectly open about all of this, is to force link finance to digital ID and government services. They're just linking it all up. And they're providing, according to them, support to 100 countries to get this implemented, which is why it's popping up all over the place at the same time. They talk about digital public infrastructure. They call it DPI. And it's talking about putting in a stack of digital ID, CBDCs, and data sharing. And it's sold as efficiency, but when you get into this stuff, it's all about, what do they call it? An interoperable global identity financial layer, tying you and everything about you to your ID, and then the government owns all of that data. And the IMF is pushing this. All the globalist organizations are pushing this as, their aspect is we want to get interoperability standards so that your digital ID and your central bank digital currency can be operable across borders, because of course they don't want to control. They don't want there to be any escape routes from this. That's why it has to be stopped in every country. If you don't stop it everywhere, what you'll find is you'll end up needing to get one anyway if you ever want to travel anywhere or escape some other tyrannical shit that's going on in your own country. Let's turn to the BIS, Bank for International Settlements, the final boss of globalist organisations. It's not Davos, Bank for International Settlements. I'm convinced they sit at the top of the pile in all this. The dark powers that control them is probably a subject for another video that might get me cancelled, so I won't go into that this time. Again, in their reports, very open about this. Identity is central in the design of central bank digital currencies, where they can control your every single purchase. And they explicitly reject any anonymity. So they say, how do they put the BIS rejects a token-based central bank digital currency that would enable anonymity. Interestingly, they're actually designing two types of central bank digital currencies. What they call the standard one, the CBDC, which you will use, which has no privacy, and every purchase you make will be fed back to government, and a wholesale central bank digital currency, which the banks and big organisations and presumably the elites will be using. Funnily enough, that layer has anonymity at its core. So it's privacy for them and none for you. Let me give you some bits from their report. A central bank digital currency built on digital identification could improve cross-border payments and limit the risk of currency substitution. What do they mean there? They mean we've got to stop Bitcoin. That's exactly what they mean. If you're able to use money which is outside the purview of the state, that moves power from the state to the individual. And so they can't risk currency substitution, which is the rise of Bitcoin. They're not quite that blatant in their reports, but that's what they're trying to do. But I was listening to a podcast by a guy a while back who does something in financial services, and he's not a central banker, but for whatever reason, he gets invited to these conferences that central bankers do. And during COVID, of course, it all had to be done online. So rather than having a conference and then the central bankers would go off into a room to have a chat, about the truly dark stuff, they kind of did it all online, and they just kind of forgot that there were non-central bankers in the call. And this guy said after a while, these guys just started openly saying, yeah, Bitcoin is going to end us. We need to seize control of money before that thing takes over everything. Central bankers are well aware of the risk. And that's why I've got so little patience for people who keep telling me that Bitcoin is a scam, or it's from the CIA, or it's a control mechanism of theirs. These guys are terrified of it. They're absolutely terrified. They are well aware that they cannot exist alongside it long time. And they are going to try and seize control before it becomes too well established. So, I mean, I'll come to it over especially the conclusion of this episode. It is all about delay. Adopt Bitcoin faster than they can shut it out, and delay them on this stuff so that we've got a chance of having a free future rather than one that is controlled by these people. So yeah, explicitly saying they want account-based, so tied to your digital ID. It gives them full visibility and control. They will be able to do anything to you. I mean, they're able to set individual monetary policy. So you have high interest rates for everybody, and standard tax rates, and then they say, okay, well, disadvantaged communities, whatever. It won't be white men. Put it. It won't be white men that are disadvantaged. You get a preferable interest rate. You get a lower tax rate. You get a higher interest rate. You've said things that we don't agree with, and therefore the cost of governing you is higher, and therefore you're going to have a less favourable interest rate. You're going to have a higher tax rate, etc., etc., etc. Your money will expire. All of this stuff. I played a clip on the segment that I did on the podcast about this with Augustine Carstens or something, Baron Carsten or whatever his name was, and he's a general manager. He's a top dog at the BIS, and he said with CBDCs, the central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that determine the use and the expression of money, and we will have the technology to enforce that. So basically saying he can do anything he wants once this stuff is in, control any purchase, make your money expire, set whatever rates for you, individual monetary and fiscal policy, down to the level of the individual, depending on whether they're a favoured group or whether they're dissenters or whatever it is. 160 countries around the world today are developing digital IDs. 160 of them, and it's all being pushed at this sort of transnational globalist level. There is an EU directive. I can't remember the name of it. It's some long string of letters. But every EU citizen will have a digital identity by 2026. So that's what this is. So you can see why the UK is doing it now. Why it's just been handed down. Why it came out of the blue. Why Keir Starmer was like, he's just been told. He's been ordered. The EU is getting this done by 2026, and Britain has to keep up. The G20. The IMF been pushing public digital infrastructure for years. If you read anything coming out of them, they describe it as the rails for development finance, and basically everything. They want to control the rails. Basically, they want to control everything that lets you do anything. That's what they mean by rails. Let's look at some of the global abuses and ridiculousness of some where this has been used before, because the examples are legion. So India, they got their Andhar system, whatever it is, and that's it starts off with a 12-digit code that the government keeps, but you access it via iris and fingerprint. Multiple, to the point of mini waves of famine have occurred of this thing, because there's some error in the system, and pensioners or those who are desperately poor, they don't get their rice, and it has led to many documented cases of starvation in India. Computer error, and it used to be that you go to your little rice man, whatever, and he would know you, and he would know you're on the assistance program, and he would give you your rice. And if the documentation was a bit iffy that week, or got chewed by rats, or didn't turn up, or got damp, or whatever it was, he would know you, and he'd give you some rice. Whereas when all this stuff went digital, it was just file corrupted, computer says no, whatever it was, no, you're not getting your rice. Caused a mini famine in India when this stuff was rolled out and didn't work properly. Well, also, for about 10 quid, the equivalent of 10 quid, Indian journalists realised that they could get themselves put on it and then get free rice. So, whoever does the data entry, you bung them 10 quid and they stick you on it. So it's a porous, crappy system. I can't just talk about India though. Estonia, they call it EID, little e and then dash big ID. They had to do an emergency patch on that recently after they realised there was a gaping bloody tech hole in it, and to the best of their knowledge, they managed to fix it before basically all of the data was stripped out. But I mean, who knows? Maybe somebody did copy all the data. It's a massive honeypot, this stuff, and so it paralysed the nation while they were having to do these emergency fixes because they realised it was wide open. China, obvious example. Digital IDs, mandatory for buying a SIM card, for accessing the internet, for transport, and they've got social credit scores laid in as well, which will be another thing that this does, is, you start with a score, whatever it is, 100, and every time you say something that pisses off the government, you lose some points. Or whatever it is that you do that they don't like, lose some points. And then the subtle genius of the social credit score is it links who you are close to, your family members, and if they are near you or if they're associated with you, they lose points as well. So if you are going to be a dissident, you have to not only be willing to sacrifice yourself to the mission, you need to be willing to sacrifice everybody else around you, your entire family and friends group. You got to burn it all to be a dissident. Which could have an interesting cascade effect if they really piss people off enough. But normally it's enough, because even if somebody is personally willing to be brave, they're not willing to cut everybody they know and their entire family out of society at the same time for their own stance. Denmark, MIT ID or something like that they've got, needed for banking, healthcare, taxes. It's had multiple outages, which locks people out of banking and medical services and everything that they need it linked to. And the authorities admitted, there's major flaws in this, and whole swathes of people are unable to access daily life. But digital ID is more important. So if there is a system crash, you're just going to have to bloody well deal with it. Singapore, SingPass, they've got. You need to access banking and housing, pay your taxes, and healthcare. Fraudsters have already hacked this one. They've changed official addresses. They've opened so they can change your address. They can make themselves the owner of your home. They've opened bank accounts and phone lines in victims' name. It shows once you have a digital ID, people can hack it and then just take over your life. And the first thing you bloody know is when the police turn up to evict you from your own home because you're not the legal owner of it anymore. Your bank accounts are emptied, or loans have been taken out in your name, as happened in Singapore. Belgium, EID, a bit like the Estonian one, but without a dash. Smart card for any state services. Retailers have been liberally fined for failures to comply with the stuff. So now you need to show it for things like a bloody loyalty card. And it shows how quickly firms will piggyback onto this stuff. It's like, oh, it's not worth resisting. Now, if you even want a loyalty card or whatever, we're just going to link it straight to the digital ID. So function creep is inevitable and will be pushed and will be welcome. Sweden, they've got a bank ID. So obviously this one is linked to your bank account. And basically what happens in Sweden is if you are in any way associated with things that the government doesn't like, you just get debanked. You're just debanked. Regulators it's even got to the point where the regulators are having to step in and say to the banks, look, you're closing far too many accounts. You know, you're supposed to go after people we don't like, but you can't do it too much because it becomes a bit bloody obvious. If you're a nationalist, if you're pro-Sweden in Sweden, which is a bizarre concept, yes, I know. But just imagine whatever woke country that you're in. If you're pro your own country, you're an enemy of the state. And so loads of nationalists get the wokesters just go running off to the bank and say, oh, that person is a nationalist. He's pro-Sweden in Sweden. And then the banks go, oh, that's not good, is it? And then they debank them, right? It's depersoning them. They can't pay their rent. They can't buy food. They're just out of the system. Rife in Sweden. I mentioned Ukraine with their Dalia, whatever however you pronounce it, system. Replaced the existing ID. It replaced driving license. It replaced passports, vaccination proof. Incredibly brittle authoritarian infrastructure there. Ethiopia's got their FADA system, for banking and services, already being used for ethnic profiling. So yeah, you could have another Rwanda type situation before long, and you don't have to guess whether they were Tutsi or whatever the other one was, Hutu. I mean, I know it's different in Ethiopia, but all the same. Ethnic profiling was like one of the first things they did with it. So everywhere that this has been rolled out, it has been an authoritarian mess and nightmare. We cannot stand to let this get rolled out in the UK. We must stop it. We must, at the very least, find every mechanism to delay it. Because if this goes through, I mean, it's just the bloody end. It really is. So let's quickly talk about what it actually is. Ultimately, it's a big centralized database. You get a unique digital identifier, some string of probably 12, 13, 14 numbers, something like that. And then that's what matters from then on. Those numbers, not you, the number. It will be linked to biometrics as fast as possible. So it could be fingerprints, it could be iris scans, it could be a facial scan. It probably will be a facial scan, and they'll ask you to submit a photo. Or more likely, when you get the app, it will be like, okay, take a photo of your face, and now from two different angles, or it will be pan the phone around your face to build up a biometric profile. And then if you've ever been to a protest, it will immediately link because they've been gathering that biometric details for years. Or if you, the ability to do it with CCTV. I mean, they just track where everybody is, where everybody's been, who you associate with, all that kind of stuff. It will be a gateway to, accessing banking and financing and voting and travel, as I've already demonstrated with all of those other countries. I mean, it'll just come immediately. It'll be linked to pensions, SIM cards, internet access, the whole thing. Central bank digital currency, what's that? I mean, I have done a Brokenomics on that before. You basically have no money. All of the money sits with the central bank, and you are temporarily granted permission to use a token of the central bank's money, but it's entirely under their control based. you won't take any possession of it. It will be account linked to your digital ID sitting on their servers. So in order to have anything, your perception of having money will be to log into your account through your phone. It links to the central bank, and it will see how much money that you've been granted the use of temporarily, and that will be wealth in the future. It won't be anything that you can physically take charge of. And yes, I know a lot of people leave their money in the banks, but you can always pull it out into cash. You can always put it in gold. You can take possession of it. You will not be able to take possession of a central bank digital currency because it all lives on the central bank servers, and then they can attach any rules or permissions or restrictions that they wish to it. So you have to understand that digital IDs are the key, and central bank digital currencies are the lock. You get to this point, they won't even need police because it can just all be done by computer. Oh, you're behaving in a way that we don't like. Rather than having to send the cops around at 3 a.m., at 3 a.m., your ability to bank will just be switched off. And then you'll find out at some point that, presumably the next day, that you have been depersoned because the state doesn't like you anymore. All the kind of stuff you can do about it. I mentioned some of this, but it gives them a toolkit for programmable money. Anything that you can imagine on this, money expiring. So it could be, it wouldn't be surprised to me in 30 years' time, you get to the point where you get your paycheck paid in and it's all got a 30-day expiry. Consume, or it will be expired by the end of the month. They can put caps on buying meat, carbon, alcohol. You'll get a carbon allowance, you'll get a calorie limit, gambling caps, anything they don't like. Only the consumption that they like. And it won't allow much by the way of asset gathering, of course, because as we know with this stuff, the whole goal is that you will own nothing and you will be happy. That is the goal. Geofencing. They already tried to push 15-minute cities. We had a big thing on here about resisting 15-minute cities. A lot of content creators went hard on this. A lot of people pushed back on it, and they stood back on their plans to introduce 15-minute cities. But with this, they can bring it back, and they can just say, yeah, you're geo-fenced to your local area. There you go. You're limited to that. You can't move around. It'll be like Oxford, but worse. Selective freezings. So people they don't like, dissidents, as happened a lot in Canada. In Canada, people went to protest, or some people just donated money to the protesters, and they were debanked. Selective freezing people out, as happened in Sweden today under their digital ID system. That will happen. Also, you have to remember this is a massive surveillance honeypot. So every purchase, every movement, every communication, because your internet access and accounts and SIM phone, it will get linked to this very quickly, as I showed with those other countries. We'll all be linked to this. All of that is going into a government database. Massive levels of surveillance. Medical history will get linked in, political history, travel records, anything like that. Whoever owns this data owns ultimate power, really. As a distant movement, how would you even start to fight back against something like this when your opponent is so massively over-equipped against you? They know everything, and you're working with incredibly sparse information. Also, of course, it creates a massive single point of failure. One hack, and it's all out. I'm recording this on the morning that the Games Workshop, the people who do the Warhammer 40k, the little model things, they got hacked or were leaked or something like that. And all of their models, their entire revenue stream was just pushed out onto the internet. Why wouldn't that happen with this? It would. All the time, some civil service twat goes on a train and leaves his laptop on the train and just leaks. At one time, I remember it was classified details on submarines, specs on submarines or something, and and then the Royal Navy was reduced to ringing around all the dissident journalists and saying, do you have it? And if you do, can we have it back? This comes through. In the future, you try buying a train ticket. The purchase will just fail when you try and make payment for it, because you've been flagged for hateful content or hateful opinions or something like that. The supermarket till, the digital till, will call the little assistant person over and say, too many items of meat in the basket, remove some to complete purchase. Your savings will disappear. Your fuel pump will refuse you if you've gone over your fuel limit. Utter bloody tyranny must be stopped. A little bit of historical precedent for you. Should probably mention that. So, ID cards were introduced in Britain during World War II, and they were abolished in 1952, which, as you will note, is 7 years after the end of Second World War, because we were still a proper country back then. But all the same, even back then, even in bloody 1940s and early 1950s Britain, once the government had got a power, they really hate letting it go. And what it came down to in the end is there was some chap, some normal chap, and he was like, no, I'm not doing this. And he started going about his ID card. And he got stopped driving somewhere by the police, and they demanded to see his ID card. And he's like, no, I'm not doing it. That it's fundamentally un-British or something. What did he say? It's that's not what we do. And the state went to town on him. The police arrested him, dragged through the courts for 2 years, but the message resonated. No, it's not British. It's not what we do. And there was so much public support that in the end, I think it might have been Churchill who came back into government and abolished it at that time. But there was overwhelming public support that, no, this is not what we do. We cannot accept it. It's fundamentally un-British. So, yeah, we've had them before. And then, of course, we had them again. Blair's attempt in 2004, he kept this up for 6 years, trying to push them through, but the resistance was so relentless that even he had to drop it. Again, as I said, linked to counter-terrorism at the time. And the COVID response, the NHS app. If you try to go to the pub, they demand to see your NHS card. I told you the story about trying to go to a school governors meeting or whatever the hell it was at the time and being asked to present it. It's like, no, not doing this. The powers will ratchet up. Once a system is created, it never self-abolishes. Yes, we did manage to get rid of it in 1952, the last time we sort of properly had this. But it was a very different country back then, and people had a sense and a purpose of Britishness that they simply don't have today. And the state was less corrupt and awful than it is today. So stopping this before it comes in is going to be a hell of a lot easier than getting rid of it after it comes in. And the other thing is going to be tied into multi-billion-pound contracts. If Keir Starmer gets this through, he will just give a contract to these big tech companies for hundreds of billions that are payable over the next 30 years and are non-cancelable. So somebody comes along and says, if Nigel Farage is good to his word, and the moment he gets elected, he immediately cancels them. Well, the contract will be written in a way that these tech companies get their money anyway, which will be done in an attempt to make the cost of cancellation seem like it's completely unworth it. So there's a tech integration. Oh, and the security theatre. Every new crisis, be it climate or terrorism or pandemics or whatever the next thing is, whatever's coming down the line as 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, there will be a story. And that will be used to justify ramping up the system. Now, the other argument I'd make is, look, I suspect if you're watching Brokenomics, you're not a massive fan of Keir Starmer. I've just thought of a point I should make. Look, it's got nothing to do with Keir Starmer, but you would think that let's say you had a penchant for hiring young Ukrainian male models, definitely not rent boys, male models. You would implicitly understand the danger of having every transaction tracked. Yes. So nothing whatsoever to do with Keir Starmer, that bit. It's anyway. I divert. Where was I? Oh yes. So yeah, even if you don't trust Keir Starmer, if you're lefty who somehow found yourself watching this, you do understand that future nationalist governments will get this. And okay, let's say you think that I'm awful, which is obviously a ridiculous opinion. I'm great, but if you did think that, and I'm well to the right of Nigel Farage, if I came into power and I had this, I would use it to mass deport millions of people, and it would give me. You could easily link it to ethnicity. I mean, it's going to be linked to births and death register, so you're just going to get that as a standard. You'd be able to deport millions of people, and also all my political enemies. I'd be able to use all of this power against them. Anyone who speaks up, the James O'Briens and the Lewis Goodalls and the Alicia Kearns and all the massive shit libs that are out there. I'll just be able to deperson them, debank them, take them off the internet. So if you're an authoritarian Labourite, you have to be really, really, really bloody sure that the left is going to be in power forever. Right, and all you need to do is look at opinion polls today to see that you're not even going to be in power 4 years from now, if you can even make it through the next 3 budgets, which you probably won't. So do you really want to be handing a right-wing nationalist government this sort of power over you? Because yes, you're going to abuse it against us from day one. I understand, and that's going to make you feel good. But sooner or later, somebody like me is going to get the hands on power. And if we have this, we are not going to hold back at hurting you in every way, because that's exactly what you have done to us forever. And I'm fed up with this absolute bollocks about, fair play and all the rest of it. No, the left has shown us what they are. They hurt us the moment they can, and quite frankly, I'm all for it now. You set up the game, you define the rules, fine, we're playing it your way. You don't want somebody like me having this control over you if you're leftist. Right. What was I talking? I was talking about ratchet effect, wasn't I? I should finish my thought there. Anti-terror laws passed after 9/11. It was used against journalists, protesters, even petty crimes, even people who put their bloody bins out on the wrong day were getting anti-terror legislation used against them. So there will be a ratchet in everything that we do. The other part of the ratchet I should mention is probably China. It started off in China with just being you just needed to attach your real name to a SIM registration. It was an anti-fraud measure at the start. Within a few years, it became a fully fledged social credit system, controlling, travel, finance, political behaviour. That's where this stuff goes immediately. Back in the day, the DPP, one of the Northern Ireland parties, they were quite good against this, and there was a Lord MacDonald who said it threatened to make a surveillance society. Absolutely right at the time. David Davis, as I've already mentioned, he was very sound on this back in 2010, and he described it, and he's quite right, as a solution looking for a problem. Again, that's why it was billed as terrorism at the time, and now it's billed as migration. Actually, I'll give you a quote from the Chinese state. It's been translated, obviously, but the quote is: "Discredited people should not be permitted to travel by plane or high-speed rail." That was on some document I found from bloody China. Just for the fun of it, we might as well dismantle. Shouldn't take long, this bit. Why it won't even work. for the stated reason, which is illegal migration. First of all, they just give digital IDs to the migrants. It'll just be handed to them. It will be. They just get one, and it might be flagged as saying illegal. But if you're going to have a society where you can't do anything out of digital ID, of course they're going to give it to the illegal migrants, and it will let them buy stuff. It'll just track them. So it won't do anything for that. Employers already know that they're hiring illegal migrants, and they just do it off the books. Happens a lot in food delivery, but it happens a lot in construction and agriculture and hospitality and all those sort of things. They know perfectly well, and they just pay them cash in hand, which I suppose is where the central bank digital currency thing comes in. But they can pay them in other ways. They can, maybe not a bag of rice, but they will be able to find a way to pay people off the books if people want to work and they want to hire illegals. Or the other loop around this is what happens on Deliveroo. So you get one guy sign up with legit credentials, but he's foreign, and he's from that part of the world, and then 200 more people from that part of the world turn up, and he shares his credentials with them. And there's one case of a delivery driver who had 200 people pretending to be him. Most efficient bloody delivery driver in the world, which is how they twigged it. It's like, oh, this guy does a lot of deliveries, doesn't he? Yeah, that's because there's 200 of him. That one gone. The Home Office already has the power to prosecute on all of this stuff. Hardly ever uses it because it's not a priority. Coming after people like me at 3 a.m. because we tweeted something, that's their priority. That's what they put their effort into. They don't do any. They don't do any of this stuff. So yeah, black market, cash in hand. That will continue. But on the flip side, people who just are like, no, they're the ones who are going to be excluded. And there's already 1.7 million people in the UK who do not use a mobile phone. Many, many more do use a mobile phone, but don't use a smartphone. Not all of them, they're just excluded. They're just out. The political dissidents and the elderly most at risk on this one. It'll be an admin drag on businesses because now they've got to incorporate this into everything they do. IT chaos. The numerous examples I gave you with other countries around the world, it doesn't bloody work. It gets hacked. It fails. It's abused. Or just IT failures in this country alone. So the NHS wasted something like 12 billion in the early 2000s on various schemes that it couldn't get off the ground. Universal credit IT system tried to be rolled out. It collapsed due to inefficiency. With all of these state projects, there's always years of overruns and bugs and downtimes and billions of bloody wasted. It creates a single point of failure. That's the biggest thing, as I showed with my examples around the world. This happens all the time. Central databases become a massive honeypot, and they always get leaked or hacked because all of the data is there. That is the most valuable thing. So the hackers, who are more talented than people looking after it, go for it. I could recite a number of examples, but I gave it above. And bear in mind, right? Once this stuff gets hacked, it's not like a bloody password. You can't reset your fingerprints. You can't reset your face scan or your iris scan. Once it's hacked, you are screwed. What else should we talk about? Oh, yes. Yes, let's get a bit more Brokenomics with this. We need to talk about the political economy of control is how I think about this. Historically, governments have extracted power via taxation, which they've then used to buy hard power, police and military and all that kind of stuff. In the digital era, data itself becomes the form of tax base. It is the new rent that the state extracts from all citizens because it gives them that same level of control where every transaction is observable and taxable. The state no longer needs to trust because it knows everything and it can skim data in real time. It can apply fees to everything that you do in real time. VAT no longer requires a VAT submission from a retailer. They just take it automatically at the time. If they decide to bring in a wealth tax, they will know exactly how much wealth you have in every account, because every account would have long ago been forced to be linked to your digital ID, or it would have been closed. In was it Singapore? I think it was Singapore. They just closed 200,000 accounts because they weren't linked to digital IDs. So, yep, 200,000 accounts gone. Money in them gone. So you will have to register everything you own to this digital ID, and then they will see absolutely your wealth levels. And then, Labour government or future Labour government or future social whatever will think, oh, we need a wealth tax. What level should we set it up? Well, let's find the richest Labour MP and do it about 10 grand above that, and then just take 30% or whatever of everything above that as a wealth tax. That will absolutely happen. The other thing you've got to bear on, this is going to create a huge compliance industry in government and tech. And then there's going to be a whole new bloody parasite class of auditors and IT firms and verification providers that will take this digital ID and link it to a verification provision system at a shop or a bank or so. It's create an enormous new parasite class, all of this. And that already happened in financial services with Know Your Customer stuff. God, I had to spend hours going to training courses being lectured about Know Your Customer stuff that came in after 2008. Or was that? No, that came in early. That came in after 9/11. Huge compliance culture, parasite class created off the back of that. This will be the exact same. Also, as per the Tony Blair Institute, you are fusing big tech and the state. What we used to call fascism, but now they call people who don't like children being murdered or raped, they call those people fascists. Whereas actually, if you know your history, fascism is actually the fusion of the state and big industry. So now it's just the state and big tech, same thing. So it'll be fascism, but they will just they will call people who don't like it fascists instead. Clever little flip, yeah, genius. Big tech will basically just get guaranteed. I mean, big tech effectively just becomes our feudal class, our lord class at that point, and they have guaranteed contracts running in perpetuity on this stuff. Financial leverage as political control, as we talked about. You'll be debanked, depersoned, shut off if you don't like it. Massive incentives for government expansion, because now they know exactly how much they can extract, exactly what they can control, so they will metastasize to fill all of those power vacuums that now exist as a result of this better data. And international agreements, the entire globalist class is lined up on this. UN, G20, IMF, World Bank, Bank for International Settlements, World Economic Forum. They're all aligned. They're all marching in lockstep on this. They're all pushing this in order to stop freedom and Bitcoin and all the rest of it. So, what's the alternative? Is this actually inevitable or not? At the moment, we have cash. It's resilient. It's anonymous. They don't like it. If you go to your bank in Britain and most countries today and you try and withdraw a reasonably large amount of money, you have to provide an explanation as to why you want your money. And if they don't like the explanation that you give, they won't give it to you. Multiple cases of that. They just refused. They say, no, you're not taking it out of the bank if you haven't been able to provide an excuse which we deem acceptable. If you say, funnily enough, they've never asked me. I mean, I pull out big wads of cash, but for whatever reason, they don't ask me. I don't know why. But if they ever did, I'd say I'm just going to blow it on coke and hookers. And they would be fine with that because it's consumption. And they're fine with that sort of stuff. Cash has been falling out of practice. So it was 60% of all transactions in 2008, which is not that long ago, right? Now it's 14%. So from 60% to 14% in the space of a bit over a decade. Bloody impressive how they managed to, sideline that. The main alternative, of course, is Bitcoin, decentralized money. Complete separation of state and money, just like it used to be in the good old days, when you had gold and your feudal lord or whatever, your king. Yes, the king put a lot of effort into getting as much gold as possible, but they weren't fundamentally the same thing. The king could not go to a computer and tap in some buttons and quantitatively ease himself more gold. When he ran out of gold, he ran out of gold. And when you started to get parliaments and all the rest of it, kings had to go and ask very nicely and provide a good justification to the parliament as to why they should be given more gold to launch a war. And if you were good at it, if you were like a Henry V, was it, or was it the second? I don't know history. But anyway, one of the Henrys, he was really bloody good at invading France. Top chap. And so Parliament was like, yep, you want to invade France, you're going to get a load of gold because you're always going to come back with more. And also you're going to beat the French, which is probably the most important thing. Whereas inept kings, those who are a bit crap at it, they're just like, no, you're not getting any gold because you'll waste it. And that's the discipline that Bitcoin would impose on the state. We could withhold money from them because the two are fundamentally disconnected, and they desperately want to stop it. The other thing that I should mention is zero knowledge proofs, because I actually believe that there is a case for digital ID. We're living in an increasingly digital world, and you don't want to get into a situation where people can impersonate you at will. So there is absolutely a need for digital IDs. But I think, a bit like Bitcoin, it should be separated from the state. And there is technology being developed. Well, it's basically there. It's not quite game ready yet, like Bitcoin is, but that's because there's a bit of a less of a focus on it. But it could be there very, very soon. Of these zero knowledge proofs, which are a little bit like Bitcoin, but for ID. It's all tied up with cryptography, but it allows you to be the master of your data and control it and decide who it goes to. And the more important thing with that is it allows you to verify whether a thing is true without handing over your data. So very simplistic example. Let's say you're a teenage girl who goes to a nightclub and the bouncer wants to verify that you're over 18. Well, she has to show him where he lives, where she lives. She has to hand over an ID with her address on it. Otherwise, she's not getting in. So she wants to verify that she's 18, but she actually ends up showing the bouncer where she lives. With a zero knowledge proof, you will be able to verify a statement such as I am over 18 without revealing any other data. You'll be able to do it by just verifying this is true or not. I'm not going to get into any depth on how they work. Super dumbed down version. Imagine that you're doing one of those books, Where's Wally? I think in America they call it Where's Waldo or something. But you know the ones. You open the book, it's a big like A3 double-sided thing, and it's got these little people all over this scene, and then one of them is Wally or Waldo or whatever it is in your country. And the whole game is you've got to find the guy. Now imagine you're in a household and your brother or parent or child, whatever it says, did you find them? Well, you can't verify that you found them without also revealing to the person and then spoiling it for them. Unless you were to take a huge piece of paper, bigger than the book, so it doesn't even reveal where on the page it is, with a tiny little cutout the size of a Wally, and put it over that, and then you can say, look, I found him, but it gives the person who's looking it doesn't spoil the exercise for the person who's... That's a super dumbed down version of zero knowledge proof. And if this becomes a bit more of a thing, or you want it, I can go into a more detailed explanation, but it involves getting into cryptography type stuff, which we will be here for a while. And the other reason, the other alternative to this stuff is simply enforce the existing rules. If you just did that, I mean, at a minimum, we know that there'd be tens of thousands of people being deported every year because we've already been able to do that under the existing rules. So just enforce the existing bloody rules. And if you really want to, leave the ECHR and set up offshore processing. Done. That is the alternative. We must get into a future where identity and money is separate from the state and held at the sovereign individual level. If we get that, I think we've got quite a bright future ahead of us. If we end up with the version that the globalists want, where it's all controlled by them, we're looking at centuries, if not more, of slavery. This brief window that we've had for not really more than a couple of centuries, a bit less than that, of individual rights, liberties and freedoms, that will turn out to be the merest blip, a historical aberration that will be forgotten in time. We will go back to what we've always been, which is serfs. Slaves, serfs, fiefdoms, an untouchable elite, a power class, and then the rest of us. Don't let us. This is so fundamental. This must be stopped at all costs, basically at all costs. How do we go about stopping this shit? Because obviously it's getting a tiny bit worrying. Now, my key message here is delay is victory. So if and they are dead set on this, I don't know. I mean, if you can figure out a way to just kill it dead in its tracks, great, do that. But I can't. The best thing that we can do is slow this down as much as possible, make it as difficult as possible, make it as complicated as possible. So, flood the consultation with negativity, flood parliamentary participants and committees with your objections, protest, what do they call them? Data requests, information, what the things. Spam them with that. Demand full impact assessments. These alone take months. Legal challenges. Challenge the procedure. Go after the vendors and the parties involved. Make people speak out about it and give irreconcilable statements against it, be they retailers or politicians or whatever. Invoke data protection, invoke human rights, Equalities Act, promote offline alternatives or things like zero knowledge proofs. Promote that. Maybe I should do some more videos on zero knowledge proofs to just emphasize that there is a perfectly viable, functional, non-state alternative to this. Oh, freedom of information requests, that's it. Spam them with that. Challenge it. Make it a cross-party civil liberties issues. Get journalists and normies, whatever level of power or influence you have, spread it that this must be stopped. Highlight the foreign examples. Maybe I need to do a segment on the main podcast, because that gets more viewers, on just highlighting, as I did above here, all the times it's gone disastrously wrong, and just get that out into the ether. Spread all that stuff. Highlight the people that, there's 1.7 million people without phones, many more without smartphones. Highlight all of this stuff. Make a counter offer. Let people know that Bitcoin and zero knowledge proofs is an alternative system to mandatory digital IDs and central bank digital currencies. Economic pressure on the big vendors. Make it clear that you don't want to tolerate this sort of stuff. Politicians, you can inject poison pills into any legislations. You can delay the process. You can make commitments, and if none of this, and at each stage, it's easier to delay. It's easier to slow it down and jam it up than let it get to the next stage. If it does get to the next stage, well, that's a massive failure. But at that point, you need mass non-compliance. You need to make sure that everybody, by the time this comes in, Keir Starmer says by the end of the parliament, you need to make sure that everybody's ready just to flat out refuse it. Because they can't jail all of us. You have this in Austria with the vaccinations. That they wanted everybody to be vaccinated, and they had something like 6 million people who weren't vaccinated. And so they brought in this law and said, well, you're going to be jailed then. You're going to be jailed if you're not vaccinated. And 6 million people held the line. And the day before they had to start jailing people, they repealed the law because they realised, shit, mass non-compliance, we can't do this. That's what we need to get to this. You need to do a bit of both siding on this. So if you're speaking to a sensible person, lay out most of the arguments I've made here. If you're speaking to a lefty, just point out, do you really want to hand Nigel Farage or somebody who comes after him who's actually based this control system? If you're the scary right-wing uncle and you're speaking to, woke tard nieces and nephews and stuff about this, and they see you as a nutter, just say, well, do you want me to have this power over you and all your friends? To punish you for being woke and all the rest of it. Make them think, make them understand that this can go both ways. Litigation can be used on this. Judicial review can be used on this. Naming and shaming politicians could be used on this. But most of all, just use the clock. Just use every tactic, every bloody tactic to... You have to recognise that these ID systems, they take years to implement them. They're going to try and get it done before the next election. Slow it down, bog it down with everything. Essentially, if you can delay it, you can defeat it. No one wants to hand their political enemies a kill switch. So make sure everybody understands that's what they're doing. Cash is a safety valve. Use it more often. And ultimately, resist the building of our, as I've said before, digital IDs are the key and central bank digital currencies are the lock. Build and make use of and understand alternatives, Bitcoin and zero knowledge proofs. And if you do that, then everyone will start to realise that this is nothing but this is going to lead to centuries of slavery. Normal service will be resumed. We've spent most of our history as serfs, peasants, slaves, feudal subjects. It's just this brief window, this tiny brief window when we were individually sovereign. And if we don't stop this, all of that will go away and normal service for humanity will be resumed. Stop this any bloody way that you can. Spread the message. Do whatever you can, even if it's just influencing 2 or 3 people. Do that. Stop this.